So we just did a few. Yeah, we just did a few
Um,
questions. And Justin's gonna do most of
So I guess
it.
we can start by or you can start by saying a little bit about yourself, like where you're residing, what you're doing now, anything else you'd like to add.
Okay, just look at just a general introduction of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm Julius Paras. I now live in the city of Santa Clara. I live in the South Bay. Pretty much after graduating from Stanford, I've been here almost all those years, working at different companies, tech companies. I worked for Stanford a while, startup company, and I started a nonprofit organization. So I had a few experiences. And I was actually born in the Philippines, but grew up in Illinois and Louisiana, Nolens, Houston, Texas, and Westlaco, Texas.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess we can start. How and why did you decide to start PASU or FSU? If that's
Oh,
how
okay.
it began.
I would say that back before it was PASU, it was called SFA, the Stanford Filipino Association, and I don't think it was really any one person's idea. There were a few people thinking of it. In fact, there were Filipino students here before us from the Philippines. One person that I remember specifically, his name is Robert T.H., and he was trying to build a community of Filipino grad students from the Philippines. I think they were actually using the name SFA before we were, and I asked him, is that something we could focus on with Filipino undergraduates from the United States Filipino Americans? He said, that's fine. And when that happened, we were talking, we meaning the other folks I mentioned who were also thinking of starting a group that was focused on the undergraduates. Angelica Aiton, Donovan Samara, Rand Quinn, and then we had other folks, Janet Poe, who joined us, all around, Brett Sevilla, all these folks around this time, were all interested in having a community of Filipino undergraduates. And the few of us, I think why we get credit is because we filed the paperwork in the student club office, and someone had to put their names on the paperwork, and we were the ones who put our names on the paperwork. So we started it because we saw each other, we met each other, we wanted to know more about each other, and we wanted to do things together. So we thought we should have a group that does that. And SFA was the first name, even though we borrowed it from the Filipino grad students when they were here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of this group, how many students or how many members were there at the end?
Wow. I'm laughing because it's like it changed depending on the day because we didn't know all the Filipinos on campus. There's no lists. So I always like to say it was a handful of people because of the 4 people that I mentioned, and then we got the other handful as we went walking around the dorms. So in the beginning, it wouldn't have been more than 10 people who showed up at a meeting, like a full-fledged meeting. And then when we did planning, it was literally a handful of us, and sometimes it was 2 or 3 of us just in between classes doing planning. So
Okay.
that's about the size. A handful or 2 handfuls.
Okay.
So to recruit, you had to go door to door or dorms.
That's a great question. So to recruit, we did a couple of methods. We had something called the Facebook of Frosh. It was a printed document, and everyone would take photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would look in there and look for the Asian-looking faces that had Latino last names, and that would be our first step of trying to find people. Occasionally, they had where people were from, like it said they're from the Philippines. Like, okay, should at least talk to this person because they're from the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we reached out among freshmen. If we were lucky, we got the Frosh books for other years, and we could look at them. Otherwise, we went to the Asian American Activity Center and asked if they knew of any Filipinos or Filipino students who had come in that were interested in joining a group. And so that's basically how we recruited. And our first event was a dance party, and we did it with Okada House. I think it was also jointly with the Stanford Vietnamese Association because we were so small. And so that was how we got our name out there, by throwing events and seeing who would show up. Yep.
Okay. So when organizing events or just organizing in general, did you have any committees, and if so, how many? Or was it just like a collective effort to
Uh-huh.
just make something happen.
Yeah, I apologize for smiling so much because it just makes me go back and I have so much nostalgia. And when you say the word committee, it's like, wow, that's so huge to have committees because I know you all have like frosh
Yeah,
interns now. It's like you have committees and interns. So the way we did it, it's kind of like a circle. Like if the three of us or there were more of us who were PASU, we would just talk to each other and say, so what are you interested in? And some person would be into arts or poetry or performer. Another person was an engineer. Another person said, I just want to know more about history. Then we ask each other, well, do you want to be in charge of an event about history? So I'll do it, but I need your help. It's like, of course. I mean, we're the only ones who are doing it. So it would be like rotating leadership. It's like, okay, you want to be the one to kind of like have the vision, then we're here to help you shape the vision. Just tell us what you think needs to be done. I can help make a flyer. I can tell all the people in my dorm. I'll go around to all the dorms on campus during house meetings. So it became that kind of way where we said, well, I have an idea. Can you support me on this idea? It's like, yes, we can. And then we just rotated, and that's how the different events happened.
Okay, great. So were there any challenges, or how did things come about during the first few years of PASU?
Yeah, the biggest challenges were, or so we thought, having enough people. So, how do you have a group with 3 people and 5 people who will show up to that? So that was one challenge. A second challenge is we knew we weren't going to be at Stanford all the time. So who was going to lead the group if we couldn't find more people? So this notion of even succession planning occurred to us from the beginning in the early years of like, who's going to do this? We had logistical challenges like, if we're going to learn tinikling and perform, does anyone know how to perform tinikling? Does anyone know how to choreograph? Where do we get our clothes? Where do we get the music? Like those challenges we had. And unfortunately, in the Bay Area, there are a lot of Filipino clubs. Just because Stanford didn't have one, Cal had a huge Filipino club. So we made friends with other schools. And some people lived in the Bay Area, so they had like aunties and uncles who could help us with these kind of things, make lumpia, tell us where to, how to choreograph, and maybe even have some clothes, so we could model our costumes after those. So those were the more logistical challenges. And then finally, one of the biggest challenges to add to that was just we didn't have money. Like when we first started, we were paying out of our own pocket. Like, want to make flyers? Oh, do we have to go to the copy center and make flyers? Those kinds of things. So I wanted, for me personally, and I think it was a shared feeling, is how do we get more people involved? How do we get leaders for the next generation? And how do we fund all of this in an official kind of way where it wasn't just this small group of people validating its own existence, but actually getting recognition from the university, recognizing um, there are Filipinos here on campus, and understanding that that should be supported, and that university resources, whether student or even administrative resources, should be committed to promoting the vitality of this group of young people.
Great. So were there any successful and or memorable uh, things that you faced or that you enjoyed doing when starting the group?
We enjoyed all of it, pretty much.
I'm
Everything was new to us, so everything's a discovery. From we had late night runs to Jack in the Box to do strategic planning. That was our strategic planning sessions. Um, we asked the at the time financial aids office and the admissions office to meet with us because we wanted to know, given that there's so many Filipinos, Vietnamese folks in California, why weren't there more folks on campus, more students on campus? So we were kind of surprised even that we got in conversation with officers in the admissions office. I think one person who was actually quite helpful, I should mention her by name, is Cici Evangelista. She's from the class of '88, I believe. She worked in admissions. She's Pinay, and she was local, and so I think she had some understanding of what we were talking about because when she was here, there weren't many Filipinos here either. So we were fortunate to have these conversations. So those were challenges and successes. Challenges in that given that we were so small at the time, um, learning about how to work with different departments in the university, from the Haas Center for Public Service to the Asian American Activity Center, learning how these groups and official departments could help us was a big deal for us. And then as we started getting more programs off the ground, it attracted other schools to know that we existed, and we got invited to go to conferences at Cal and Hayward. And then we would just keep hearing more, and eventually, we would have people from this. This ties in, and it ties into a movement, a youth movement in the '90s, to where once we knew that Filipino youth existed at colleges, we started contacting one another, and so then, Filipinos from Stanford would go to DC and meet people there in New York, and we would present at each other's conferences. Whoever could afford flights, we would crash on people's floors and stuff like that. So it actually, the success was manyfold, but I think the joy came from just it all happening and getting the newness and learning from everyone as it evolved.
Did you have a lot of support from people, from like faculty and staff on campus in its founding, or was it?
To be honest with you, we were pretty invisible to them at the beginning. Only, the handful is the word. Only a handful of faculty knew about us.
Yeah.
A handful of staff knew about us. One thing that was very helpful to us was there was a community at Stanford that wasn't students. It was called FACS, Filipino American Community at Stanford, and they had members from the financial aids office, people who we would meet through the just as we were students paying our tuition bills. I remember folks, Tito Gervasio, Joe Vasquez. These were people I remember who were not only in these offices, but were also members of FACS. And so as soon as they heard that the students were here organizing, they said, "We can help you. We can help you with the, we know where the bamboo sticks are, and all those, and we know where you can buy lumpia and things like that." So I have to give a lot of credit to FACS for being, almost these parental figures or older figures who would acknowledge our existence, and we would be like the same age as their kids, but they would still give us these are young leaders, and they would treat us well and not be too condescending with us. So that was more than a handful, and they were helpful. But people like Rick Ewan, who was the dean of the Asian American Activity Center, he knew we were there. He let us do our own thing, and he would be supportive as we did. I'm like, you want to do that awareness week? You want to do that? Yeah. Why don't you set that up? So he didn't micromanage us, but let us. He kind of nudged us and it gave us a space to grow. So people like that were really helpful.
Okay, so during your speech, you talked about the levels. So can you explain more about that and the principles that you valued when creating this group?
There's going to be a lot in that with the levels. That simple framework was more based on observation than anything else. So just to repeat what those levels were, the first one was just, can we recognize that each other exists? That simple step of, are you a Filipino on campus? Are you a Filipino in my community? Or are you a friend of a Filipino who supports, where I'm coming from and my background? We need to know who you are. So the first step is recognition. Without dots, you cannot connect them. So this is really just knowing what the dots are, so to speak. With the second piece being, can you talk to one another? When I say that I really care about having a Filipino group on campus, and you say something like, "Oh, why don't you just join that other club?" Like, you didn't really hear what I said, right? I said I needed a group for this group of people. We can partner with another club, but we want one specifically for this group. That may not be getting where I'm coming from. So the level 2 of the community empowerment is really understanding that if there's something that's meaningful to me, that you're really trying to help me shape that, and I'm the same for you, that I hear what you say. And I think a good testament to that is if I say something to you, can you represent me to someone else? Or can you honor, as I like to say, can you honor my absence as well as my presence? I feel that's a true test of level 2. Level 3 is like, can we do something together? Can we make a conference? Can we organize a party? I use my simple examples of like, can we cook a meal together? Can we travel together? Because in those moments of where you're actually working together and you're building on knowing who each other and recognizing and communicating, you learn like what gets on people's nerves. You learn what people can do well. Like someone seems to be able to really do that one thing well, and so when you start recognizing patterns in that and produce and use those skills that people have and what they bring to the table, their backgrounds, their perspectives, and are able to create something of value together, that is so special. That's what I call level 3. And level 4 is a little bit more esoteric, in that it's what I call building people up, and lifting them up. So sometimes we always think the leader is the one in front. It's the person with the title of president. But a lot of times there are leaders who are not that person. And sometimes those are the most effective leaders. Can they be the ones to lift other people up? And there's always people like this, because you won't have the one in front without the other people. And so that's kind of that role, is that I'm trying to think of a really good example of lifting other people up. It's I was at a okay, so like use another simple example of if I'm going to give a speech or if I'm going to present at a conference, lifting another person up is, hey Julius, these are the people who are going to be at the conference, just so you can prepare and know who your audience is. Like they're going to be 5 high schools or 10 high schools, and they're going to be mostly high school students. There'll be a few college students. So like you're telling me who's going to be there. So like that helps lift me up because it makes me more prepared. Things are also like, maybe you're in the workplace and you're new to the job. Lifting me up would be something like, I knew the person who did your job before you did it, and here are some things that they didn't do so well, and here's some things they did well. Maybe you can learn from that. And while I'm at it, let me introduce you to a few people who are key people that you need to know. Like that is lifting me up. In some instances, you call it mentorship, coaching, but those are examples of what I call level 4, where you're not so interested in yourself anymore, but you're interested in helping the other person become more of who they are. So that's level 4.
In your speech, you also talked a lot about the influence of the Black community had on you. Were there any lessons you learned from them? I guess, did they kind of help inspire you to start PASU?
I've always been treated well by the Black community, not just at Stanford, but in my life. I grew up in Illinois, Louisiana, Texas, and whether it's having Black classmates or classmates who are from backgrounds, Cajun, Chinese, Iraqi, what else was it? Iranian, like those environments embraced me when I was there, and it was the same case when I was here. I mean, who would, like I mentioned in my speech, I went to the Black Pre-Law Society. It's obviously well, it may not be obvious, but I wasn't. Someone pointed me out, like hey, do you know where you are? And so, but after I told them why I was there, they said that was fine with them. And so, taking it from that instance to, I also had Black teachers, by the way, when I was growing up, so they were very influential to me. And being able to perform in a show, in a culture night with Black folk, it was like I felt like I belonged. When I think you're treated like that by people who may not be the same as you, you can treat others like that. And like that's a hope that I have for PASU and others. Like, and I know that's how PASU is. Like it's like, oh well, hey James, you don't look Filipino to me. Why don't you be a Frosh intern? It's like, okay. So so like that's how I felt.
You have another question?
Oh, I guess. So do you know exactly when Kayumangi started?
I don't. That was after me.
That was after you. Okay.
I can just tell you the things I can tell you are like when we first did hip hop, when we first sang a cappella, when we first performed tinikling or sing. I can tell you those.
That was great too.
But I can't tell you like now we are a different separate thing called Kayumangi. Like I can't tell you that. One of the memorable performances of tinikling, we started probably in the spring of 1990. Actually, we were in Chester Union. The first performance was on the other side of Chester Union, facing White Plaza.
Wow. Okay.
With bamboo sticks, and it was part of like a Friday noon series of special performances, and one of the special performances was us. And people like Janet Poe, Rand Quinn, and were so instrumental in getting this off the ground. Manher, Jarawala, other folks, Lisa Yumel, because they had the boldness to perform. I was only the moderator. I actually didn't perform in that. And I told the history of the dance and what have you, but they were the ones who had the guts to perform with bamboo poles and costumes that didn't quite look like they were from the Barrio Fiesta days. So that was the first Tinekuni performance. And then in 1990-91, we were invited to perform for the centennial celebration of the university.
Oh,
So
wow.
like that was a big deal. We were in Robley Dance Studio. At that time, we could afford the bamboo poles, and we had uniforms and things like that. So that was a big deal to be part of the 100th anniversary of the university when our group was only a couple of years old at that time. Yeah.
Such an honor.
First hip hop. I have to say this because that's my thing. We performed in a talent show for Okada in I think it was 1990, May of 1990. To New Edition was the group back then. Any Heartbreak. It was Filipino and non-Filipino performers. It was actually Chinese and Filipino. From there, PASU performed more hip hop. We got invited to perform for Faces of Community. So all the freshmen knew who we were after that first week. And then after that, after my time here, people started forming the hip hop groups like DV8, Jam Pat, all these different groups came from kind of this history. I'll claim it. I'll be bold. Like Asian American hip hop started with a strong influence with PASU, and I will also have to give a shout out to the Korean community, where folks like Dan Lee and Gideon Yu, who is now general manager of the San Francisco 49ers, were hip hop performers back in the day.
Wow.
That's the origins of Asian American hip hop.
That's so cool. Do you have any other questions? I guess so. One last question. What do you think of how PASU has gone? Like how far PASU has gone since you started and where it is now? Your thoughts on that?
I'm so impressed by the group. And first of all, I'm gratified because we didn't know how much the group could grow from when we started. Just surviving, just existing. It's an existential issue in the early years. To come back year after year and hear that a new initiative started. There are new interns, that PASU is doing a project in some part of the world now. That is really what's impressive. What's also gratifying is to be interviewed and to be acknowledged by this current generation. And Angelica posted on her Facebook that we fly to New York. I crash on her airbed. We have dinner with people from the class of like 06 and 11, and like we didn't go to school together. All we knew is that we were all PASU, and then when we show up, and we're all there, and like it's amazing. I'll go to Manila. I'll look up people. Hey Mary, class of '96, one of the creators of PYLC. You have time? Yeah. We'll be in the middle of Greenfields, or in the middle of the mall.
Greenbelt.
Greenbelt, yeah, Greenbelt. And I'm like, okay, there's Mary waiting for me, who I knew from this campus. So PASU for us now is a family in some ways, the good and the bad, as well as diaspora. So like folks from the Philippines who come from our PASU and people who grew up in the United States are coming together in this group, and that's another thing to be so appreciative of. I think, yeah, there's so many possibilities every year, so it's great.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you
This
so
was
much.
really
That
helpful.
was awesome.
Yeah, super inspiring.
Thank you.